Well, hello and welcome to Ask Aaron. We are on our normally scheduled day, just a few hours late. All sorts of reasons, one of which was I was driving a bus for a field trip. Pastors do everything. Not all. Just when you have kids in private school, you sometimes drive bus for the field trip because you have a bus driver's license. Anyway, as always, these answers are mine, not the church's. I hope they agree, and we'd love for you to continue the conversation in the comments section below. Got a couple questions here that go back quite a few weeks. Got a long message this week from one of our attenders, and happy to answer the questions. So if you're wondering, that seems like it's from a message like a month ago, it was, and that's totally fine. I am willing to answer any question at any time that you send it in, and this came in via the emails. So a little bit long, but hang with me. We've got 4 questions to get through here, and we're going to do our best, all right? First question, from a message given on 7/24 on Gideon, which you can find, hillcityhudson.org/media, or you can go to the app and find it there as well. I said, God must prove himself to us before we follow him is a false truth that we believe, and God has already proven himself fully capable is the truth that we need to believe. The person who writes the question says this: I agree with the statement, but there is an issue for me. I want to feel God's love and presence, especially in those times when I am depressed, sad, and lonely, but I don't know what God's love and presence feels like, and I am sure I am not the only one who feels this way. Thus, for Gideon and myself and others who know God, I am not sure the issue is one of trust. I know God is there for me. Rather, the issue is where we as earthly beings don't necessarily know how to feel or be aware of God's presence. So the question is kind of, how do I feel God's presence, and how do I know that God is there for me? And this one is a little bit tricky, and I'll try to address it in a couple ways. One, especially during times when we are depressed, sad, anxious, going through any sort of mental health or physical health thing, our emotions tend to be muted. They tend to be felt less, right? Depressed people say, I don't have any joy, I don't have any energy, I don't have any excitement for things. People like myself who struggle with anxiety say the anxiety's right here and I can't feel anything else, I can't see anything else, I can't experience anything else because it's there and it's just overpowering. And so it wouldn't be strange if you were in a mood or a situation of life or a season of life where you're struggling, where you would say, I don't feel God's presence. For a very long time, I didn't feel God's presence. I had all sorts of questions and doubts and struggles, and it was literally like I woke up one morning and the feelings that I had about God were gone, and I kind of looked around actually and was like, where'd you go? Why don't I feel you? Why don't I experience you the way that I have always sort of felt and experienced you? And I kind of had conversations with people and came up with this sort of idea or this thought that I'm sure is not unique to me, but I didn't really get it from anywhere else. But I'm sure other people have had it, where faith is kind of on this spectrum, right, between emotion and intellect. That emotionally we feel God's presence, and intellectually we know truths about God's presence. And the perfect place to be is somewhere in the middle, right, at 50-50, where we feel and we know, and it's just perfect. But that's not real life, and we're never actually really there. And so sometimes when we're experiencing the presence, we have to rely on the intellectual, and other times we can rely on the emotional, but it's never too healthy to be too far to one side or the other, because you want to know God's word, and you want to know the promises that God has made, and you want to know the truth about God, and you want to be able to feel God's presence. Now, this question is asking very specifically, I don't feel God's presence, I want to feel God's presence. I would say to do that, put yourself in situations where you are more likely to feel the presence of God, right? If you are turning on worship music in your home and singing along and worshiping, whether in the shower, in the car, like, it'll be easier to feel God's presence because you're pressing in. Get together with a group of people and have a time of prayer, inviting God's presence and asking for God's presence. Again, it's not like you're trying to manufacture it, but you're pressing in. Open up your Bible, read it. Take out a book, a Christian living book on a topic that you have always wanted to read. Turn on a show. Believe it or not, guys, I'm not the first person who's done Ask a Pastor. There's an entire television show on YouTube and TCT TV called Ask a Pastor. In other words, put yourselves in situations where you are drawing close to God. The Bible's very clear. Draw close to God and he will draw near to you. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have goosebumps or this overwhelming warmth. Or sometimes it just means that you can take a deep breath and you can trust the knowledge that God is with you because you have the knowledge and the truth and the intellect, and you're just over here on the emotional, right? If it's 50-50, you're at like 48 on the emotional, like you're just barely feeling, but you do feel something. There are going to be times when you don't feel anything at all. And in those moments, you're going to want to rely on that intellect. And you're thinking to yourself, well, this seems weird. Guys, in every relationship that we have, in a marriage, in a relationship with our children, these things happen where we don't feel all the things, right? Like, I got married at 24, and I remember when I met my wife at 18, I was hot and bothered. And then I became a 40-year-old man with 2 children and a full-time job and a house, and I still love my wife, and she is still beautiful, and she is still the best friend I have ever had and the most important person in my life. But the feelings do not come hot and heavy like they did at 19 and 20, and she was 16 and 17, and, like kissing down by the car when I said goodbye. Like, none of that. I mean, there's some of that. There's a lot of that. I love my wife a lot. But you understand the point. Your kids, right? You love your kids and you hold your kids and they're cute and they're adorable and they're little babies and you feel overwhelmed with love. And then they turn into smelly, sweaty teenagers or little brats that don't listen. And for a few minutes, you don't feel the feels. You know you love them. You would still take a bullet for them. But it's just not all feeling, okay? So it's not strange that this happens in our relationship with God. It's just about drawing near, reconnecting, spending time. The same way you should date your spouse, you should be in a relationship with God. The same way that you want to spend time with your children, you should want to spend time with God. Do everything you can to put yourself in a position to feel God's presence. And even if it's just a little bit, some of us are feelers, some of us are thinkers. There's a spectrum, and we go back and forth on it, okay? I think I've said a lot and enough on that. Next question. A message on 8:14 about John the Baptist. It's basically a question about what happens when the sky opens and the dove descends and the Holy Spirit comes to rest on Jesus, and who sees it and who doesn't. The gospel stories kind of vary, where it says that he, meaning Jesus, saw it. In John, it talks about how John saw it. So Mark and Matthew give different kind of stories than Luke gives. Now here's the deal. It's the same story with the same elements and the same things happen. It's just told differently. And this is one of the coolest things about the Gospels, especially the synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke. Okay? They tell the same stories, but from different points of view, from different people who saw and took them in. And so what's really cool about that is when I was struggling with a bunch of doubts and questions, I found this cold case detective who became a Christian apologist, and he compares a lot of things to crime scenes. And he said that one of the coolest things about the Gospels is that they don't read as though all the authors got together and made them up. They read like actual eyewitness testimony. That they read as though it's three different people telling the same story from three different points of view. And so as we read this story of Jesus being baptized by John the Baptist, I think that's what we're getting. We're getting 3 or 4 different points of view. And so we know that Jesus saw the Holy Spirit and heard the voice of God. We assume that because John says that, he saw it, that everybody could see it, but we don't really know for sure because Mark and Luke says he, but it doesn't disclude. It's like when it says that there was one angel at Jesus' tomb, it doesn't mean there weren't 2. It just means there was at least one, right? So there's all sorts of different interpretations on this and what it means and what it says. All I know is that the fact that it reads like actual eyewitness testimony, to me, speaks volumes. That the disciples didn't get together someday and say, okay, now here's what we're going to write about Jesus and his baptism by John the Baptist. No, they shared their own true, honest perspective about what happened and how it happened, and that's what made it into Scripture. And what it says is that even after that experience, whether John the Baptist saw it himself or he was told about it by Jesus because it kind of happened in this supernatural moment where only Jesus and perhaps John the Apostle saw it, who knows? Even after that experience, John the Baptist had doubts and he needed to struggle with them, and he needed to send to Jesus' disciples and followers and send his followers, John the Baptist's followers, to Jesus to ask, are you the Messiah? Even after that experience, he needed to know. And that's kind of what I was talking about in that message, right? That it is okay to struggle with doubt, that you should struggle with it, that you should face it, that you should lean into it, that you should do the research, because doubt is meant to drive us towards finding answers. And so that's what it did for John the Baptist. That's what it did for me. That's what it has done for a lot of people. And that's what it can do for you. All right? Now, moving on to questions about this week's sermon on the Apostle Paul. It says, Paul affirmed the death of Christians. How far does guilt of justice misapplied by the church or the state travel? Does it apply just to the leader or to the whole population? Now, this question is phrased rather strangely, so I asked for clarification. What the question is asking is, if the country I live in or the church that I belong to does something immoral and sinful, and I don't participate, am I still guilty because of association? And I would say it kind of depends. If you are part of the reason that the people who are in power, and they told you that they were going to do these immoral and sinful things, and you still voted for them, or you still helped them get into power, then yes, by association, you are contributing to that sinful behavior. But just because, say, the President of the United States makes a decision that we feel as Christians is sinful, and we are citizens of the United States, are we inherently sinning? No, we're not. If you go to a church and you vote people onto a leadership team or board, or you nominate them onto a leadership team or board, or you allow them on without, bringing up something that that should disqualify them, then yeah, in a way, you are contributing to the sinful behavior that is happening in that church. If you don't call your leaders on what you think to be sinful behavior, then you are contributing. But just because you attend a church and the pastor of that church makes an error in judgment and does something sinful, no, you are not sinning just by association. I know that there's all sorts of talk about generational sin and national sin, and I think that that's just too far down a rabbit hole to get into. Everyone is sinful. Everyone makes mistakes. And so whether it's who you put into power or which country you belong to, we have enough as people to repent for, to turn away from, to acknowledge. And if you want to repent for the sins of your leaders or your church, by all means, go ahead. There's not going to be like extra points for repenting of something that you weren't a part of, but you can repent and pray for the leaders as you're supposed to of your church and your country. This question talks about Paul affirming the death of Christians. Paul did more than just affirm the death of Christians. Paul participated in the arrest and the persecution and even the killing of Christians. And so Paul was guilty by association because he was associated. You don't have to worry if you disagree with certain policies that your country puts into place. Just know that repenting and praying for your leaders is never a bad thing. All right? Last question. How could Paul go so long doing what he thought was holy work, but he was actually opposing God? How did he go wrong? Well, he went wrong because he was raised in a certain way, and he became married to that way. He became a proponent of that way. He became a zealot of that way. And then, faced with a different view, he didn't do all of his research. He didn't have every conversation. He remained in the faith of his childhood and the faith of his young adulthood, and in a position that gave him great power and authority and money, until he had a life-changing exchange or meeting with Jesus. Until he met Jesus face to face on the road, he did not question enough the faith in which he grew up, because there were people running around. Obviously, Paul was against them, saying Jesus was the Messiah, Jesus was the Son of God, we don't have to be Jewish anymore, we should be followers of Jesus. And Paul was comfortable in the faith of his childhood, in the faith that gave him the strength and the power and the authority and the money and all of that. And you can see why a person would want to keep that. And a lot of people in today's world grow up in a certain faith and become comfortable in that faith, and they don't ask the questions that need to be asked about every faith, right? When I grew up Christian, I lived a certain way until I started having those doubts at 25, 26 years old, and I had to go back and do the work to make sure that I knew why I believed the things that I said I had believed, because the truth is I didn't really know why I believed them. And I did the work, and I looked into other religions, and I looked into, why Christianity was the one true religion, and was it, and was there evidence for that? And I did all of that work. And Paul didn't have to do all of that work, because Paul had a real life physical meeting with the risen Jesus where he had his life completely changed. And so how was he able to do that? He was able to do that because Paul loved all the things that all of us love, often more than God. Money, power, all of the stuff that Paul had, he loved. And he loved it more than he wanted to know the truth about Jesus and whether or not Jesus was who he claimed to be and all that kind of stuff. Okay? So when he finally has an experience with the risen Jesus, all of that changes. None of it means anything to him anymore. Paul says, I count it all as rubbish, as trash, as crap. Even stronger than that. He says he counts it all as junk compared to knowing Christ. And that's where we all need to get, right? We need to know Christ the way Paul knew Christ, the way that we have a real life-changing and life-giving relationship with Jesus that changes us each and every day. All right, those are the questions and the Aaron answers for Ask Aaron this week. As always, thank you for asking Aaron. You can join us even on Labor Day weekend. We're going to have service. hillcityhudson.org/media on the app, or in person, St. Pat's Education Center, downtown Hudson, 10 a.m. on all three of those sources. We would love to have you join us. Thanks for asking, Aaron. We'll see you next time.